Hey, hello, everybody. This is Do Not Take a Bribe with Rabbanit Sharona Halickman. Thank you so much for joining us and for watching either live or after the fact. Rabbanit Sharona Margolin Halickman was the first congregational intern and Madricha Ruchanit at the Hebrew Institute of Riverdale, where she provided religious education and spiritual direction for the community. She is a graduate of Yeshiva University, BA and MS, as well as Matan's Eshkolot, Tanach, and Hilkheta programs. Sharona is the founder and director of Torat Reva Yerushalayim, and she writes a weekly blog on the Parsha for the Times of Israel. Sharona is the author of two books, Parsha Points, Torah for the Land of Israel, and Parsha Points, More Torah from the Land of Israel. Rabbanit, take it away.
Thanks so much. It's always great to be back. This topic, unfortunately, is always relevant. When we talked about this a few months ago, it was relevant. It's even more relevant now. Every day we catch people all over the world taking bribes, especially in the politicians, and it's really unfortunate. And I think that that's why the Torah has to emphasize so many times why this is not okay and how we can really learn that there are different types of bribes. It's not always money. It's also gifts. It's also the way that you speak to somebody. All of those could have effect on a court case or in the general community, which could affect different decisions and cause a lot of trouble down the line where people aren't treated fairly because they gave some type of an incentive. So we're going to see where this comes from and see really how we can be really careful to make sure that this doesn't happen to us. So we're going to start with Shemot chapter 23. It says, Lo tateh mishpat evyoncha beribo. You shall not subvert the rights of your needy in their disputes. Midvar sheker tirchak v'naki v'tzadik al tarog ki lo etzdik rasha. Keep far from a false charge. Do not bring death on those who are innocent and in the right, for I will not acquit the wrongdoer, right? We see that God is ultimately behind the scenes on all of this, right? The judges have their job, but they are really messengers of God. And actually, judges are called Elohim, which is the same name that we have for God. They have a job to do, which is to represent God. So if they don't do it properly, God will have to intervene. Okay, this is the important line. B'shochad lo tikach. Do not take a bribe. Ki hashochad yaver piklim v'yisalef divrei tzadikim. Because bribes will blind the clear-sighted and upset the pleas of those who are in the right. Right. So Rashi comments on this. V'shochad lo tikach. Do not take a bribe. Afilu lishpot emet. Even if it's to tell the truth. Right. Let's say you know that the poor guy is the one that's innocent and he offers you a chocolate bar, whatever it is. You cannot take that from him, even though you're planning on announcing that he's innocent. And the same thing certainly for a rich guy that wants to give you a $500 gift card to Neiman Marcus, right? Neither are okay, right? Even if you had that decision already, by taking the money, by taking the incentive, any type, you've already disqualified any right you have to be a judge. So certainly if you were going to go it that way anyway and they gave it to you, you can't take it. And certainly not the other way around. You know the poor guy was right, but the rich guy gave you the money, right? So don't think that you can just, go with him because you need the extra cash. It already says this in Dvarim, so we see this in another place in the Torah. Lo tateh mishpat, same thing, right? Do not subvert the judgment. Yever pekachim, what does this mean? Afilu chacham b'Torah, v'notel shochad, sof shetitzraf da'ato alav, v'yishtakeach talmudo v'yikahem ma'oreinav. So the Gemara in Ketubot is giving a scare tactic, which we sometimes see in the Gemara, where the rabbis want to tell you, if you think that you're going to do this and come out okay, you're not, because at some point you're going to get all mixed up, right? Your mind is going to get all crazy. You're going to forget everything that you learned. You're not going to be able to see clearly anymore, right? So this is really what was used as a deterrent. I don't really think that that's the best way to use scare tactics, but that was used in order to make sure that people understood that they have to be upright. I would hope people would just know that without, but apparently sometimes people need that push. V'salef means mikalkel, it ruins. Divrei tzadikim, dvarim mitzudakim, mishpatemet. So it will ruin the righteous ways, right? The good things, the things that were supposed to be done properly. And that is in the Targum in Aramaic, it means upright. So Sforno says, "V'lo tateh mishpat evyoncha beribo." So don't mess up the trial of the poor person. Right? Don't treat one side different than the other, where you're too nice to one side and too soft to one side and too hard to the other side. שבעלי דינים מספרים טענותיהם, וכמוכן שלא יהיה אחד עומד ואחד יושב ודומיהם. Also, one shouldn't be standing, one shouldn't be sitting. Everything should be equal. You should treat each person that comes up to speak in the same manner. Midvar sheker tirchak. You should stay far away from anything that looks like it's not upright, right? Mikol davar shiuchal lisavev sheker. Anything that looks like it could be even similar to a lie, stay away from. As the rabbis taught in Pirkei Avot, be very careful with what you say, because you don't want somebody to learn how to lie from you. Chizkuni comments, don't take a bribe. Even to do a, if it's a true, it's a true judgment, still you can take the bribe. Okay, so we're going to see a little bit later that there's a guy in the Gemara named Karna, and what he would do is he would be out of his job, right? He would, like, believe it or not, even the judges and the rabbis in the days of the Talmud, they didn't just sit around waiting for judgment or sitting around for people to ask them a question in religious law or whatever it is. They didn't have jobs as rabbis. They didn't have jobs as judges. They had a different job, and then when they were needed, they were called. So what would happen here is that with Karna is that in order to get him to be the judge, what you have to do is you have to get him out of work, right? You basically have to take him away from the job that he's doing. So in order to make sure that he's paid whatever, kind of like unemployment, right? Whatever he would have been paid that day, he's not going to be paid because he has to go judge a case. So in that case, you can pay for the use of him, right? Basically that he would be the judge, right? You pay the fee to the court, but it can't be that one pays one amount and one pays the other amount, right? Both sides have to pay. It has to be, in front of everybody so that it's known that it's not a bribe, but rather it's payment for the services rendered. V'shochad lo tikach, do not take a bribe. Samchu kan ki minhag hu sha'ashir noten l'dayan shochad latot dim shenekenegdo. So unfortunately, it was a minhag, right? Usually minhagim, customs, are fun things like putting on costumes on Purim, right? Things like that, having an exciting Seder, right? Certain things that you eat or don't eat on Pesach, like kitniot, legumes. But here it's talking about a minhag, a custom that the rich person would give the judge a bribe. That is not a good custom, right? In order to sway the judgment in his favor. So that is not a minhag. That is not a custom that we want to emulate. And it's really unfortunate that this was known, that this was done, but because it was known, that's why the Torah and the Talmud have to go out of their way to explain why we should not do this. So what they want to try to do is move from from guilty to not guilty, or whatever it is. It's not fair for you to sway the judges with money, because ultimately, right, it's supposed to be whoever is supposed to be let off is let off, and whoever's supposed to pay or whatever they have to give has to pay, right? And it shouldn't be that the judge is being swayed. Even Ezra says, "V'shochad gam yizkir kol zeh ki ha'ashir yiten shochad l'dayan lahatot midin dalim." Right. So it was known, just like we saw earlier, that even Ezra also comments that certainly what would happen is that that the rich guy has all the money and the poor guy doesn't, so he would kind of grease his palm a little bit. Okay, so now we saw what the quotes were from Shmot about not taking a bribe. Now we see in Dvarim, in the book of Deuteronomy as well, we're told the same thing, almost. So we see from here that it was so important for the Torah to repeat it, even though the Torah is very careful not to repeat anything unless it's absolutely necessary. Shovtim v'shotrim titen lecha b'chol sha'arecha. So you should have magistrates and officials in all of your gates. Asher Hashem Elokecha noten lach, everywhere that you're living, which is in the land of Israel. L'shivtecha v'shavtu et ha'am mishpat tzedek, and they must judge the community in a righteous way. Okay. Lo tatem mishpat, lo tekir panim, lo tikach shochad, ki shochad yaver einei chachamim v'salef divrei tzadikim. Almost the same verse as we saw before. You shall not judge unfairly. You shall not show partiality. You shall not take bribes. For bribes blind the eyes of the discerning and upset the plea of the just. Right. So it's so important to, and here it's tied in with the tzedek tirdof, right? That you should run and do justice, right? Not just justice one time, but justice shall you pursue, right? The repetition here is for emphasis, right? Maybe we should change the name Uri Tzedek, right? Super justice, right? Because you guys do a lot of justice. Justice shall you pursue, that you may thrive and occupy the land that your God is giving you, right? So the land of Israel is a gift to us, but we have to deserve it, right? We have to be good. And unfortunately, we see a lot of things that go on here in the courts that are not appropriate, where they're taking one side because of a gift, because of money, because of who they are, because of who their father is, whatever it is, because they're unfortunately Ashkenazi or Sephardi, or even, an American would not get favored, but what an Israeli would, right? Things like that. It's not fair, right? There are a lot of things that are not fair that we need to work on. And we want to hold on to land. We have to do our part to uphold the righteousness. Okay. Lo takir panim, Rashi says, af bishat hatano, right? Even at the time where they're each, pleading their case, don't favor one over the other. Right? We saw this earlier also in Shemot, right? Don't be harsh on one and soft on the other, vice versa. Same thing, right? One shouldn't be standing, one shouldn't be sitting. So if you see that the judge is showing favoritism to the other guy, or he's, acting nicer to the other guy, you're going to get all messed up in what you're trying to say. And that's not fair either. V'lo tikach shochad, do not take a bribe. Afil lishpot tzedek, right? Like as we saw earlier, the Sifrei brings it here as well. Do not, even if it's for righteousness and you're going to do the right thing, still you cannot take the bribe, even if it was what you were going to decide anyway. Because the shochad, the bribe, will blind the judge. Right? It's very hard once you got the bribe to keep an open mind, because you're thinking, I got that Nordstrom gift card, he's the one that gave it to me. The other guy didn't give me anything, or he only gave me a chocolate bar, right? Of course I'm going to go with the Nordstrom guy, right? And that's where the problem begins. So neither should give anything, because otherwise it's always going to be in the back of the judge's mind. Even if he doesn't plan it on having it there, it's going to be there. You can't not see it. Divrei tzadikim, the ways of the righteous. Dvarim hamutzakim mishpatei emet. A true judgment. Tzedek tirdof. Haloch achar beit din yafeh. So when it's talking about running after good judgment, go to a good court. What's been interesting in Israel in the last few years is that they've opened up the courts. For example, if you want to get married, you have to go to the Rabbanut, to the religious authorities in your city. Now they opened it up that you could technically go to any city you want to sign up for the wedding. Okay, so people say, why? What's the big deal? It's a big deal because some are nicer than others, and some are stricter than others. And if somebody's more open-minded, they may not want the strictest judges of Jerusalem or Bnei Brak. So it's good that they have more opportunities to go to other courts now and don't have to be stuck with the one where they're living. Leman tachya v'yarashta, right? Because we want to live and we want to inherit the land. And it says, Gedahu minui dayanim haksherim lachiyot et Yisrael shivan al admatam. We want to stay here. And how are we going to stay here? By having kosher judges, right? You think kosher only refers to food? No, it's also kosher judges is that they're honest, right? That's people use in English also. They'll just say, is it kosher, right? Like, is this transaction kosher, right? We're not eating it, but we want it to be, we want everything to be right and correct. So Chizkuni says, Lo tateh mishpat, do not pervert judgment. V'lo tikach shokan, don't take a bribe. Lemala beparshat mishpatim, he's here. I'll have yon v'kam b'stam. Okay, so if you may have noticed that when we first brought in the book of Shemot, it was referring to the poor person, right? That you shouldn't, harm him. But here it's talking about in general, which means you have two people that have a lot of money. don't favor one of them either, right? It's not only about what it said in Shemot of rich and poor, it can be for anybody. So it's saying, do not accept a bribe in order to pass fair judgment. Bribing judges in order for them not to prefer justice has already been forbidden, right? So we're expanding this about adding to the fair judgment as well. Vidal lo tahader biribo, right? So it said in Shemot, in the book of Shemot, in the earlier source, right? Nor shall you show deference to a poor person in dispute, right? So sometimes it could be that you say, oh, it's a poor person, I feel bad for him, so I'm going to let him win, right? Or it's a rich person and he gave me money, I'm going to let him, right? Neither is fine, right? Just because you know the poor guy needs the money because, he doesn't have a lot of money, and the rich guy, what's the big deal if he has to pay $100 afterwards? But the idea is that it doesn't matter, right? You can't get involved as a judge. It's not your business to decide who needs the money more. It's your business to judge who should be judged fairly. And Vayikra, as a new source, lo tasu avel b'mishpat, do not render an unfair decision. Lo tisa pnei dal, lo tader pnei gadol, right? So don't favor the poor or show deference to the rich. But tzedek tishpot amitecha, judge your kin fairly. It has to be done in a fair way, leaving all of the past history behind and just going in there with a clean slate. It says in Dvarim, lo takiru panim b'mishpat, right? Do not be partial in judgment. Kikatan kigadol tishmeun, right? Almost the same thing that we saw in Vayikra. It's interesting that these have to repeat themselves to emphasize. Lo taguru mipnei ish, ki hamishpat la'elokimhu, right? We saw this earlier, that the judgment is for God, and we said that God is called Elohim, and so are the judges, because they are sort of working for God. Okay, so if you need, right, if it's difficult, bring it to me, God is saying, and I will deal with it. I will help out, right? So this is very important, that they're not alone, and also that God is looking over their shoulder. Rashi says, "Lo takiru panim b'mishpat, v'zeh memuneh lohoshiv dayanim." So this is talking about the person that has to appoint the judges, right? Because don't forget, it's not just the judge; it's the guy on top of him that he should have good judges, right? Shelo yomar ish ploni na'eh o gibor o shivenu dayan. Right? I think he's good looking. He's nice. He's a strong guy, right? Superman, Clark Kent. I'm picking him. Ish ploni krovi. Oh, this guy's my relative. I'll give him a good job. Oshivenu din ba'ir. I'll put him in this city because I know him. Who I know baki b'dinin nimtza mechayev and hazakai mesaget et hachayev. The problem is that he's gonna give the wrong judgment if he does that, right? You can't pick people based on how they look. Maleni amisha meinahu ki'ilu hikir panim b'din. So God is saying, you pick the wrong judges as if it's your fault that they're going to show favor and judgment. So you cannot pick these guys that are not going to be proper judges. Kikaton kigadol tishmeun shehachaviv alecha din shel pruta kedin shel me'amana. Very hard to say the same judgment that's for a penny. I heard you guys lost a penny now, so for a nickel, I guess we'll move it up to 5 cents. Okay, the same din that's for a penny and for $100, right? Is it, you have to treat it fairly. You have to say, oh, that was just a penny or that was just 100, right? You have to treat both sides fairly. Shi'im kidem uva lefanecha lo tisal kenu la'acharon, right? If they come before you, you can't try to dump them off and take somebody else first, right? Oh, you're only here for a judgment over a penny, right? A nickel? I'm not taking you. I have these rich guys to deal with. No, that's also not fair, right? Bekaton gadol tishmeun ketargumo shelo tomar ze ani hu v'chavero ashir mitzvah lefarnaso as ke'et ani v'nimtza mitparnes b'minikiu. Right? Don't say, oh, I'm gonna support him by picking him to be judged to win this case, because no, just because he's poor doesn't mean that you have to be the one that finances him. Just do if he deserves it, he deserves it. If he doesn't, he doesn't. Don't show favoritism in either way. Shelo tamar he'ach ani pogem kvodo shel ashir ze bishvil dinar. As kenu achshav v'chayotze lechutz omer lo ten lo Okay, now then there's another way, okay? It's like, I don't want to embarrass the rich guy. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make believe that the rich guy won. And when they get outside the court, I'll change around, tell him, go pay off the poor guy. No, too bad. If he lost the case, he lost the case. There's nothing to be embarrassed about. Maybe next time he'll think about behaving better before the case comes up. Lo taguru mipnei ish, lo tiru, don't be afraid of anybody. Lo taguru velo tachnis dvarecha mipnei ish. Lashon oger bakait. Okay, so it says, do not gather in, you shall not restrain your words before any man. The word has the same meaning as gathering, oger. Now, in Israel, the word oger means to hoard, right? We have a group here called imahot lo ogrot, mothers that don't hoard, and they go on all these listservs and these Facebook groups and WhatsApp groups, and they will list things that they no longer need in their house so that others can benefit from it. Here, the word oger is talking about hoarding words, right? Don't hoard words. Ki hamishpat elokimu, right? Remember, it's God's judgment. Masha ata no tel mizeh shelo kadin ata mazkikani lachzir lo nimtza she'teta alai b'mishpat. Okay, whatever you take from the man unjustly, you will compel me to restore to him. It follows, therefore, that you wrested judgment against me. Basically, God is going to have to step in and give the guy back the money that he deserves. Now, that's not really what God wants to waste God's time doing. So they have to understand that God is looking over your shoulder, right? That the judges are appointed by God and they have somebody to answer to, a higher authority. Tikruvun elai, right? You're going to come to me, right? To God. Okay, so what happened in the story of the daughters of Tzlofchad was that these women did not have a man in their family to inherit, and they wanted to inherit land in Israel. And up until that time, right, this was before they went into the land, so nobody had really inherited yet, but it was known that it goes down from father to son, and these daughters said, well, who's going to inherit our land? We don't have any men in the family. So they asked Moshe, and Moshe didn't know what to do because God had told him from father to son, and here they are, daughters. So Moshe actually had to go back and ask God, right? So sometimes people don't know and they need God to help out, right? Also with Shmuel, right? With King Saul, right? Where he says, Anochi haroeh, amar lo Kadosh Baruch Hu, chayecha shani modiacha she'en ata roeh, ve'emotai hodio, kishaba limshoch et David, vayar et Eliyav, vayomer ach, neged Hashem mishicho. Amar lo Kadosh Baruch Hu, lo amarta anochi haroeh, al tabet el mareh. So what happened? King, King Saul was the king, and Shmuel came along. He wasn't sure what to do, and they just thought that Eliav is going to be the new king, right? King David's older brother, right? They didn't expect that this little puny guy was going to be the king, right? So God had to intervene in these areas. So people don't know everything, and it's okay to get God involved, and God wants to be involved. God doesn't want us to go behind his back. Okay, so now we get to the Gemara I was telling you about earlier about Karna, and some very interesting things that go on here in the courts and what is allowed as far as being paid and what is not allowed, right? So there are things that places where you can get paid, but it can't be done as a bribe. So it says Karna would take in estera, small coin from the innocent party, and an istera from the guilty party. Okay, so he's taking the exact same coins from both parties. He would charge both parties that came to him for judgment, and then he would judge their case. So the Gemara said, but how can that be? Doesn't it say, and you shall take no bribe, right? Which indicates that a judge may not take money from either of the two litigants. So how does he get away with this? If you say that this prohibition against taking a bribe applies only when a judge does not take from both parties, as there is a concern that perhaps he might come to pervert the judgment in favor of the party that gave him the bribe, whereas in the case of Karna, since he took from both parties, he will not come to prefer judgment, right? He was paid from both sides. Who says that the verse is referring only to those circumstances? Is it permitted to take a bribe even in the case when one will not pervert the judgment? But isn't it taught, and you shall take no bribe? What is the meaning when the verse states this? If it comes to teach that one should not acquit the guilty and one should not convict the innocent due to a bribe, it is already stated, you shall not wrest judgment. Rather, this verse teaches that even if the purpose of the bribe is to ensure that one acquit the innocent and convict the guilty, Torah nevertheless says, and you shall take no bribe. This indicates that it is prohibited for a judge to receive anything from the litigants, even if there's no concern at all that justice will be perverted, right? So you have to be very careful. The judge cannot take anything. This applies only when one takes the money in the form of a bribe, even if he does not intend to pervert judgment, whereas Karna took the money in the form of salary, right? We were saying that earlier, not a bribe. But is it permitted to take money from litigants in the form of a salary? Didn't we learn in the Mishnah, with regard to one who takes a salary to judge cases, his judgments are void? This applies only when he took the money as his compensation for judging the case, whereas Karna accepted the money as a compensation for unemployment. As he could not engage in his usual work while dealing with the case, he would take compensation for his unemployment. So they weren't paying him to be a judge, they were just paying him for the lost wages for that day from his regular job. And is it permitted to take money as compensation for unemployment? Isn't it taught in a Braita? Ugly is the judge who takes a salary to judge cases. However, his judgments are valid judgments. What are the circumstances of this Braita? If we say that it is referring to one who accepted money as his compensation for judging, are his judgments valid judgments? Didn't we learn in a Mishnah with regard to one who takes a salary to judge cases that his judgments are void? Rather, it must certainly be referring to the situation where he takes money as compensation for unemployment, and yet the Braita teaches ugly is the judge. So what's going on here? This statement that the judge is ugly applies only when the fact that he is taking a salary for his unemployment is not evident, right? So it has to be very clear why he's being paid, as he was not engaged in some other type of work at the time. Karna, however, would take money for his unemployment when it was evident that he was taking time off work to judge the case, as he was examining people's wine stores to see which casks would last and which were going sour, and they would pay him 1 dinar as a salary. Consequently, when Karna paused from his work to deal with the case, it was clear that he was losing money, right? So he left his job taking care of the wine, and therefore he needed to be paid for that day. This resembles an incident with Rav Huna. When people would come for judgment before him, he would say to them, as I am unable to take time off from my work, give me a man who can draw water for me to irrigate the fields in my place, and I will judge your case. So he wasn't even asking for money. He was just saying, send somebody else to do my job for the day, and then I can judge the case. And this reminds us again how the judges and the rabbis were not sitting around all day waiting for something to do, but they had regular jobs as well. Rabbi Abahu said, come and see how blind are the eyes of those who accept bribes and how they ruin themselves. If a person has pain in his eyes, he gives the doctor money, and even then it is uncertain whether he will be healed or whether he will not be helped. And yet those judges take the value of a pruta, right, a penny, small amount of money as a bribe, and actively blind their eyes, as it is stated, for the bribe blinds those who have sight. Crazy, right? For 1 penny, they're gonna decide the case differently. The sages taught, for a bribe blinds the eyes of the wise, it will certainly blind the eyes of fools and perverts the words of the righteous. It will certainly pervert the statements of the wicked. Are fools and the wicked suitable for judgment to be applied as judges, right? I would hope that the judges are not fools and wicked people, right? We would hope that they are the highest caliber. Rather, there is what the Tana and the Braita said. For a bribe blinds the eyes of the wise, right? Even though you're wise, the bribe is going to ruin it. Even if they're very wise, but he took a bribe, he will not have the world, he will not leave the world without suffering and blindness of the heart, as we saw earlier, right? We saw that earlier, quoted by Rashi. Afilu tzaddik gamor velokach shochad eino niftar min olam velo teruf dad, right? If you are completely righteous, but you took a bribe, you will not leave the world without suffering and confusion of the mind, right? So that was the scare talk tactic that we brought earlier. Amar Rava Bar Shila. Okay, so Rava Bar Shila said, this judge who borrows items from others is disqualified from rendering judgment because it is as though he accepts a salary. And we said this only in the case where he does not have articles to lend out to others, but is constantly borrowing without lending objects in turn. However, if he has items to lend others, then we have no problem with it. So if he's borrowing, and borrowing in those days was also a form of a gift, right? If people would lend out something and wouldn't really expect it back. So if somebody is borrowing and it's kind of like you gave them a gift, then that would be a problem. But if he's borrowing and he has the money to cover it, then it's a different story. So the Gemara says, is that so? But Rava would borrow items from the house of Bar Maryon, even though they would not borrow from him. So why is he borrowing? The Gemara answers, he wanted to cause them to be considered more important in the community. Rava was wealthy and did not need to borrow for his own benefit. On the contrary, by borrowing from the house of Bar Maryon, he raised their standing in the community. So he wasn't doing it because he needed the benefit. He was doing it to actually help them out. Rava said, what is the reason for the prohibition against taking a bribe? Once a judge accepts a bribe from one party, his thoughts draw closer to him and he becomes like his own self, and a person does not find fault in himself. The Gemara notes, term itself alludes to this idea. What is the meaning of shochad, bribe? It can be read shehu chad, as he is one, at one mind with the litigant, right? Shochad, if you look at the Hebrew letter, shin vav chet daled, and then you hear shehu chad. It's like if you said shehu chad really fast, you get shochad, right? So that's he's giving you the money or the gift, and then you're at one with him, right? He got you on his side, right? People do this all the time with door prizes. You get to the store opens early the first day, and everybody gets a phone charger or something, right? People already feel like they're closer to that store than a store that didn't give them a gift, right? They already got their foot in the door with these customers. So this is the same thing, right? You give a present, right? Even if something small, people warm up to you because of that. And that's already a problem, even if it's just like a cute little, bag of popcorn or something. Tana Rabbanan, b'shochad lo tikach. So the rabbis taught, do not take a bribe. Eino tzarich lomar shochad nama. We don't only have to say a money bribe. Ela afilu shochad dvarim nami asur. Even saying something verbally could become shochad, could become a bribe. Mediloktiv betza lo tikach, right? Because we have it also, betza lo tikach, right? Another place in the Torah, it says that you should not take for profit, right? So this isn't even talking necessarily about money in general. It's more broad. So what is a verbal bribe, which doesn't even have a gift, right? He had to Shmuel Hava Avar B'Mabara. Okay, so this is the story of Shmuel. He's crossing the river on a narrow ferry. A certain man came along and gave him a hand to help him out of the ferry boat, right? All the guy is doing is lending him a hand to help him out of the boat. Shmuel said to him, what are you doing in this place? The man said, I have a case to present before you for judgment. Shmuel said, I am disqualified from presiding over your case, as you did me a favor. Although no money changed hands, a bond was formed between the pair. The guy literally just held out his hand, and now he won't judge him because he helped him out. Here's another story. A Maimar, that's the guy's name, was sitting and judging a case with a feather floated and landed on his head. Okay, right? There were a lot of birds going around those days, dropping off feathers. A certain man came by and removed it from his head. And a Maimar said to him, what are you doing? He said, oh, I have a case to present before you. A Maimar said, I'm disqualified from presiding over your case because of the favor that you performed for me. Can you imagine? He just took a feather off his hat, and that's good enough to tell him that he did him a favor and he's not going to judge him, right? So we have to be so careful. Lending a hand, taking off a feather. This has nothing to do with payment at all. Another case. There was a spittle lying before Mar Ukva, like a drop of spit, right? A certain man came by and covered it. Today's equivalency, I would say, it's like giving somebody a tissue, right? He said to him, what are you doing here? He said to him, I have a case to present before you. Mar Ukva said, I'm disqualified from presiding over the case. What? He gave him a tissue and now he can't preside over the case? Please, everybody gives people tissue. Another incident. The sharecropper of Rabbi Yishmael, son of Rabbi Yossi, was accustomed to bring him a basket full of fruits every Shabbat. Okay, so basically, the sharecropper is working on Rabbi Yishmael's field. Okay, so he gives him the fruits that belong to Rabbi Yishmael once a week. Okay, he works on the field. He literally gives him fruits that belong to him. They're his fruits. One day he brought him a basket on a Thursday, right? So usually he brought it on a Friday. This time he brought it on a Thursday. Now, don't forget, this stuff belongs to Rabbi Yishmael, to begin with, okay? But he's bringing it on Thursday instead of Friday. Rabbi Shmuel said to him, what is different that you came early this week, right? Why are you here Thursday instead of Friday? So the sharecropper said, I have a case to present before you. And I said to myself that along my way, I'll bring it to the master, right? I'm here anyway, so I figured I'd drop it off. The basket of fruits. So Rabbi Shmuel did not accept the basket. And he said, I'm disqualified for presiding over your case. No, I can't. You brought me the basket a day before you're supposed to. Maybe that's because you're looking to kiss up to me. Forget it. I can't do it. Even though it was his fruit, and even though he was going to get it the next day anyway, right? So this is talking about being super duper extra careful. And this is where the judges need to come in. And this is where the politicians need to come in. Somebody gives you a box of cigars or cigarettes or stuffed bunny rabbit, whatever it is, right? You have to say, you know what? I'm not comfortable taking anything, right? I can't take anything. We do not accept any gifts, right? I'll take you out to dinner, I'll cook you a meal. No. I don't take anything, right? You can't take any chances because it will look like you're taking a bribe, even if you didn't plan it that way. Rabbi Shmuel seated a pair of rabbinic scholars and they judged the sharecropper's case. Okay, so instead he gave the sharecropper to somebody else. As Rabbi Shmuel was coming and going, he said to himself, if he wants to, he could claim this. And if he wants, he could claim that. He kept thinking of ways in which the litigant who brought the fruits could win the case. He said to himself, blast the souls of those who accept bribes. If I, who did not accept anything, and if I had accepted, I would have accepted my own property, as it is my sharecropper, and the fruits legally belong to me, and I'm nevertheless in this state of mind due to the proposed gift. All the more so are those who actually accept bribes inevitably biased in favor of the one who had bribed him. So even though he wasn't judging the case, he was thinking in the back of his mind, oh, this guy was so nice that he brought the basket early, and maybe I can think of a way for him to win, right? So he's seeing already what a push this makes on somebody that even though it was his own fruit, right? So certainly it's not good to take from somebody else. The Gemara likewise relates with this regard to Rabbi Shmuel bar Elisha, who was a Kohen. Okay, so the way that it works is that when you have the first shearing, right, when your sheep gets their first haircut, you have to give that to the Kohen, right? Just like you would give the first fruits, right? There's certain gifts that go the trumot go to the Kohen. So, so when you give the sheep a haircut, usually you give a Kohen that's in your neighborhood, you give them the wool, and then they give it to their wife, and she makes the sweaters or whatever they did with it. So what happens here? Rabbi Shmuel said to him, from where are you, right? Why did this guy come over here to bring me the wool? And the man said, I'm from such and such a place. And Rabbi Shmuel said to him, from there to here, was there no Kohen, right? You went from like New York to New Jersey just to give me this wool, right? Like, what's going on? Why don't you just find somebody, in the Bronx, right? He said to him, I have a case to present before you. And I said to myself that along my way, I will bring to the master the first shearing, right? I have a case anyway. I have to give it to Kohen. I knew you were Kohen, so I figured I'll kill two birds with one stone. Rabbi Shmuel said to him, I am disqualified from presiding over your case. And he would not accept the first shearing from him, even though he's a Kohen, and even though he would be allowed to take it because it's a gift that any Kohen could take. Rabbi Shmuel bar Elisha seated a pair of rabbinic scholars, and they judged his case. So he took different scholars to do it. As Rabbi Shmuel was coming and going, he said to himself, if he wants, he could claim this, and if he wants, he could claim that, right? Same as the story we saw before. He said to himself, blast the souls of those who accept bribes. If I, who did not accept anything, and if I had accepted, I would have accepted my own property, because technically any first shearing belongs to any Kohen. As I'm a priest and entitled to receive the first shearing, I'm nevertheless in this state of mind, all the more so those who accept bribes. Right? So we're very, very careful with giving gifts. The Gemara relates, there was a certain man who once brought Rav Anan a basket of small fish. He said to him, what are you doing here? The man said, I have a case. And I bet you know how it's going to end already. Rav Anan would not accept the basket from him. He said to him, I'm disqualified from presiding over your case due to your actions. Okay, we learn in Divrei Hayamim. Vayomer el hashoftim, re'uhu ma atem osim, ki lo la'adam tishbatu, ki laHashem b'imchem b'davar mishpat. He charged the judges, consider what you're doing. For you judge not on behalf of man, but on behalf of the Lord. And he is with you when you pass judgment, right? Like we said before, God is in the background there. God is part of this judgment. V'atayi pachad Hashem alechem. Shimru v'asu ki en im Hashem Elokeinu avla u'miso panim mikach shochad. Now let the dread of God be upon you. Act with care, for there's no injustice or favoritism or bribe taking with the Lord our God, right? With God, there is no, right? It's not like, somebody can't get into Barnard College and their parents all of a sudden come up with enough money for the new building and all of a sudden Barnard wants to accept them, right? That's not really fair. I mean, that's how a lot of these colleges exist, is from those types of donations. But is that really fair to the kid that had the same scores and didn't get it? Okay, so Rashi says here on this pasuk, for you do not judge for man. The meaning is, do not think in your heart, what difference does it make if we pervert the law to declare our friends innocent and pervert the rights of the poor and favor the rich? It is not so that the judgment is not for the Lord. Therefore, it says for the Lord, right? It's for God. God has to be in the background there. It is for him. If you convict the innocent, it is as though you take from your creator's property and pervert the law of heaven by bestowing distorted verdict. Therefore, see what you are doing, and may your heart be in every judgment, as if the Holy One, blessed be he, is standing before you in judgment. And this is the meaning of, and he is with you in the matter of judgment. In Sanhedrin, the Gemara, it stated, what are you doing? For you do not judge for man, but for the Lord. This is explained as follows. Perhaps the judge will say, how does this problem concern me? Therefore, scripture states, and it is with you concerning the matter of the judgment. It is incumbent upon you to rule justly, and the judge must deal only with that which he sees with his own eyes. Okay, and then we end with Ein im Hashem Elokeinu avla u'miso panim mekach shochad v'hu imachem b'mishpat lefichach eino rotzeh shetasu avel b'mishpat. For with the Lord your God there is neither injustice, favoritism, nor bribe taking, and he is with you in judgment. Therefore, he does not wish you to commit injustice in judgment. Okay, so we are supposed to emulate God. We are supposed to represent God. We have to make sure that there is justice on earth, because that's what we were there for, right? We don't really want God to have to stick his hand down and try to, make amends here. That's our job. That's why we have the Torah. That's why we have laws. That's why we have reasons for why things are done and not done. And we have to keep up our side of the arrangement. And therefore, everything we do, we have to think twice, right? This guy pulled a feather off of my hat. You know what? I can't judge him now, right? It looks like he gave me a gift. It wasn't even a gift. He's returning on the day of the court case. He's returning something that really belongs to me. He's dropping off my mail. He's whatever it is. He's fixing my phone battery, whatever it is. Finished, right? We can't make it look, and that's why in a lot of these cases they bring in all these stories and they say, but this guy, right? We have now with the Prime Minister of Israel, we have a whole court case going, right? But this guy gave you cigars, but this guy gave you a bunny rabbit, whatever it is. Okay, but he said, but it was just cigars. It was just a bunny rabbit. Right, it's really nothing. We're not talking about $1 million or anything. But the fact that he took something makes it look bad. And even if he's innocent, the fact that he took something makes it look bad. And we have to be very careful, especially if you're a leader, not to take these types of bribes, because it will make you look bad. So I hope that you've all learned something from here. Be very careful. Everything you say, everything that you do, because we are representing God, and we have to be very, very careful with that.
I'm not seeing any questions on the chat nor the live stream, but if anybody has any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. Also, we can totally forward them over to Rabbanit Sharona Halickman. This is a fascinating topic and continuously relevant. Doesn't really expire with time. It just changes what the bribes really are. So thank you so much again for spending the time to share your Torah with us. And it was great to have you guys here.
Thanks for having me. And the next class that we'll be doing is about restoring justice to Jerusalem, peace and justice to Jerusalem, which is a very important topic. Also, with all the controversies going on in Jerusalem from the days of the prophets until today, we have a lot to work on. So I hope to see you there as well.
Yes, so let's all keep an eye out for that. Thank you so much, and everybody have a great day.